What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hustling Sideways podcast. I'm Alan Halas. I'm a music writer.
And I am Jim Love, and I am a keynote and motivational speaker.
And it is episode 45.
45.
The
and
Hustling Sideways podcast.
It's also, good call. That's where we're at, Hustling Sideways podcast. It is, the tail end of the wildness of daylight savings time. And last week sucked. I was thrown off. I thought Wednesday was Tuesday, and I thought and it was like as if it was a full moon every night.
I still have no idea what day it is. I have no idea when it gets light out, when it gets dark out anymore.
No, there's no rhyme or reason.
And to be honest, I don't know where I am most days.
Yeah, and I actually thought daylight savings time was canceled. Like I thought that was the thing.
I think this is
like
the
a
last
year ago.
one.
Like is that like official? Like that we're done? Like,
I thought I read a thing that this is the last one.
Which is funny that like we could just dictate time now. It's like, no, we're no
stopping.
longer going to have that happen. But anyway, I'll be a fan of it because like I was all out of sorts.
Yeah.
The hour of sleep helped, but not. Yeah, I was very thrown off.
You got an hour of sleep? That's nice.
The extra hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried.
I am not a fan of it getting super dark super early.
It's quite depressing.
So now
yeah.
I'm gonna be, I guess, nocturnal for a
yeah,
while.
which doesn't. I mean, you're typically a
Kind of.
nocturnal kind of
I
guy
don't know.
anyway.
I'm always up. Anyways, we have a great guest today.
Yes.
Here on the show. Somebody that we've been trying to get on for a
A
while.
long time. Yes.
The owner of the Cactus Club, owner of Slowburn Collection as well, your candle company, and she just won a Betty Award. I read that when I was preparing. So
we'll find out what that means here shortly.
yes, Kelsey
Yes.
Kaufmann.
Hello.
That's your
Hello.
applause track.
Welcome to the Hustling Sideways podcast. Congrats on your Betty.
Thank you kindly.
What's a Betty?
Yes.
Great question. I learned about it when they called me about it.
Okay.
It is in recognition or in memorial, if you will, to Betty Quadracci, who is the former editor-in-chief of Milwaukee Magazine, maybe founder. Not
Awesome.
totally certain.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she passed sometime in the last decade, and as an acknowledgement of her devotion to community building and the arts and what have you, they established an awards program 4 years ago.
Okay. And you won one.
You're
of
the
them.
recipient.
And I won one of them. Yeah, totally.
Awesome.
Yep.
Was it a huge shock when you got the call?
You know, it's hard to say. It's been a weird few years. So yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well,
Awesome.
you are the owner of Cactus Club, but let's go back a minute before that. Now, it's gonna be weird because we know each other pretty well.
Yeah.
Jim, you're going to learn.
That's
Kelsey's
okay.
backstory,
I'm here to learn.
as will everybody.
Yes, exactly. As the audience is too.
How did you start booking shows, Kelsey?
Oh, for sure. That's a good
Or
question.
like, where did you? I guess so. Being involved with the music venue, where did you kind of get your start in music? Let's go with that.
For sure. So I had a really cool cousin named Freddie who played drums in the church band at his father's church in Michigan.
Okay.
The praise team is what they like to call those.
Sweet.
That's a great
And so between that and that movie, That Thing You Do, I felt very compelled in 5th grade to want to play the drums, and
Okay.
then begged my parents for over a year. And then in 6th grade, my friend Peter Murphy, who now plays in a band called Snag in Milwaukee, he started his first band, and then it was like really the momentum to like, oh, I really want to do this now. And so I was probably the most obnoxious child. Well, that's for sure. I was for sure the most.
It's a fact.
Yeah, that's definitely real. But so I started playing drums in 6th grade, and immediately Peter and I were collaborating on organizing shows, and that was just like the logical next step. Like we started our separate bands, and now we're gonna meet other people, and we're gonna go play with them in their parents' garages, or go to Stoughton, Wisconsin. That was our first out-of-town show. Was at the
Ooh.
Stoughton Youth Center.
I did not know that
The
existed.
players come to play.
Yeah,
I like
and honestly,
that.
I don't know if it still exists, but like these types of spaces are. I haven't, I guess, kept up in the last few years about what's going on, but like thinking about how important even the Legion halls were to us growing up, and like this like formative space that wasn't necessarily like an intended use. The veterans weren't like, can't wait to host a bunch of like annoying punk kids.
Right.
But it was a function where they could generate income, keep their things sustainable. We had a space that could be all ages where it was otherwise so prohibitive. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know if Stoughton Youth Center is still around. There's a spot in Mequon called the Logoman Center, where we did shows, and there was a a long time ago, North Shore hardcore was a thing.
Okay.
And that kind of predated my time, but I was on like the heels of it and thought it was really cool.
I'm sure there's YouTube footage of, because I was a Shorewood Legion Hall kid once in a while. I can't even claim it because I was there like maybe 2 or 3 times.
That was for sure my go-to spot. And we'd like, even when we were going, Mad Planet used to do all ages shows, but my parents weren't so enthusiastic about me going there, and so we'd all say we were going to Shorewood Legion regardless of where we were going, and then walk around and think we were cool kids from there.
How many people show up to these shows? Like when you
I mean, it varied from 35 people to 300 people.
That's
and like
really
that,
cool.
I mean, that was like an early lesson of like capacity constraints and how we conceive of that. But also when you're all in middle school or high school, people in general are like much smaller and more apt to really cram in together. So in retrospect, it's pretty wild. And then I ended up going to a wedding there maybe like 8 or 9 years ago. And it was really wild walking into the space and realizing how much smaller it is in actuality or was in actuality relative to like my memory
tiny,
of like what that meant and the significance and formative times that were there.
Yeah, for sure. So you got your start booking those shows, booking Legion Halls and small Logoman Center, all things like that. When does Cactus Club come into the picture for you? I mean, when you
totally. So, Daughters played there with, I think, Since by Man, and it was an all-ages show. And Eric, the former owner of Cactus, did a handful of all-ages shows, mostly because artists were really interested in it, but the city made it very, very difficult and annoying to do. But there was like a handful of situations where they made it make sense.
Right.
But so I went to a show there. I have no idea what year that is. If I had to guess, somewhere in like 2009 vicinity, but I could be totally wrong. And then I was playing in a band at the time that was touring a lot, and so Eric invited us to play there. So maybe the Daughter show was actually like closer to 2005 or 2006. I don't know. It was probably after the renovation, though. Hard to say.
Time means nothing anymore.
Yeah, totally. So when I was a really delinquent youth, at some point I went there, and then I was invited back to play there, and Cougar Den played there I think twice. Before.
And you were in Cougar Den, right?
Yeah, so I played drums in a band called Cougar Den that we started in high school with 2 other people.
Awesome.
Okay. And when you start working there then? At what point, like obviously playing there, everybody I feel like in a Milwaukee band at some point gets to play Cactus Club.
For sure. So I went to study in Egypt on my 21st birthday, and a few months after I left, I got a random Facebook message from Eric who wanted me to work happy hours. And so it was just like this very random, I was still studying abroad. I originally was just going to go for a semester, and then I ended up extending it for almost a year. But yeah, that was what prompted it. So the summer when I got back, having no bartending experience, but at that time it super didn't matter whether or not you had experience because it was very much like beer and shot style.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a belittling way. It was just a different.
It is what it is. It's a corner
atmosphere.
bar
Yeah.
at that point with a stage in the back.
Yeah, totally. So I started doing happy hours on Fridays and Saturdays back in 2011.
Okay. So, wow. A big transition forward. Man. Okay. So you're booking shows there, or you're bartending first. When does booking shows, I guess, kind of come into the fold too?
For sure. So that point was...
How about this?
Oh,
Sorry.
No,
How about this? I'm just
Yeah,
thinking
yeah.
it through my head. I'm like, when did somebody discover that you booked shows? Because that's what happened with me. It was people discovered that I booked shows, and then I kind of started doing it other places.
Eric learned I booked shows before I went to Egypt. He was very frustrated that I quote unquote stole a lightning bolt show from him, which I wasn't even aware of at the time that people bid for shows. I didn't know anything about it as far as I was concerned. You just set up shows as a means to doing something. Like, I want to go to Minneapolis, therefore I'm going to reach out to a friend who lives in Minneapolis, and they're going to figure out a show at a friend's house or a space. And it's just like, it was never conceived of as like a deal and a contract and money. It was just like, oh yeah, the money was like the part that made it possible, but it was never like the preoccupation. I mean,
it's really competitive to get folks at your venue.
No, I wouldn't even say it was not so much that. I just was like pretty oblivious, and I was doing it from like a standpoint of like, these are my friends and this is what my friends do. So like with the lightning bolts show specifically, it was in the what is now the Pritzloff space, but at that time it was before the Pritzloff got like a total makeover.
Yeah.
And so there were like Myad kids that had studio spaces for $600 a month, and so we rented Pritzloff, or like a section of the Pritzloff, which is probably, I don't know how they designate it, but like maybe a third of what the main big space is on the first floor. For like $150 to help offset our friends' rent for the studio spaces. And John the Savage played, and 300 folks came out. And at the end of the night when we were doing the deal, I was like, okay, you guys get $1,000. They get $200. They get $200. They get $200. And the headlining artist, Lightning Bolt, was like, what the fuck? Like, no, that's all like our money. And I was like, no, that's not how this works. This needs to be more equitable. There's another touring band and the locals brought people. And but it was all like word of mouth style, like where there was never a contract. I don't even think we really talked about terms, which in retrospect, I'm like, well, that was the booking agent's fault. Like, that's not my fault. I was a 19-year-old drunk. Like, that's whatever.
Right. Yeah, you didn't know any better, right?
Yeah, I didn't know up from down. And like, to be honest, I'm still learning a lot. Like, I was definitely like, self-taught, didn't have like there was no like real transition to me booking at Cactus. It happened more out of necessity because Eric got sick, and so it was just like his girlfriend came to me and was like, yo, can you help out with emails? And we kind of both thought it was going to be for like a couple weeks or a couple months, and didn't really know what was at stake at that point.
For sure.
But at the same time, like a week and a half after that conversation, my dad got sick, and so when I found out about the severity of his health, I ended up dropping out of my graduate program and then just kind of like leaned real heavily, unexpectedly into this role, not even knowing what the role was, but was just like, sure, I guess we're going to fill up a calendar so that we have things to do so we don't have to think about our like real day-to-day lives. Or
Yeah.
And I wasn't even so conscientious of that, but in retrospect, it's like, oh, that's what was happening.
Isn't it funny? Sometimes life changes dictate a direction that you're going. Like this is where I'm at now. I have to dive into this and learn. And I'm sure you made a couple mistakes, and you're like, won't do that again. And now,
I've never made a mistake.
Yeah, that's exactly. None of us have. Yeah.
All trial by fire,
Yes.
always coming out. I mean, hey, there's no mistakes. There's just lessons.
That's right. There are just lessons. That's true. I appreciate that mindset.
That of course leads to down the line, of course, booking shows, doing things. Eventually you get to this point, it's 2020, and somebody you became the owner of Cactus Club. I mean,
yeah, so 2019, by 2019, it was like evident that there was a handful of us working there who were doing all of the operational work, and it was like, this isn't sustainable, this doesn't make sense, there should be more agency amongst, and compensation, frankly, amongst those working here. What are our options? And we talked about worker-owned co-ops, and just like kind of went around the world of like what made sense. And somehow I decided, without really thinking a terribly large amount about what it was or what it entailed, was like, okay, I'm going to feverishly pursue buying this and running it, and then figuring out from there what that means or makes sense. And but prior to that was when Slowburn Collection got in the mix. Was I didn't think that the sale was going to go through. And so I had been apprenticing with my friend Pecha, who has a business called Beehive Alchemy. And when I didn't think it was going to go through, I was like, okay, well, I'll just do this candle hustle for the winter, and then I'll get a job with Bernie Sanders, and then everything's going to be fine. And obviously, a few of those things didn't go in that order. But so the candle thing, though, was just like kind of a backup plan as Slowburn Collection. It was supposed to be and is less so like an entrepreneurial business venture and more just like a meditative practice that's fun, that's playful, that we can share with people. So it like started before even we conceived of the name, was just like me giving, like apprenticing for this person, but then just like making a ton of gifts for all my friends and family, and just like playfully experimenting. And that's still what it kind of remains, only I can't just give everything away.
Right.
I like when they start like that. It's like you find joy in it, you're able to give it to people who also find joy, and then all of a sudden that grows into like, oh, I may have an actual product here that I can now, sell a little bit. Like that's, and I like how it starts organically, because you never got into something like that to make money. It's like, this is cool, and
absolutely
I enjoy
not.
it.
I like be all end all is like taking trips internationally so that we can like explore where different essences and fragrance essences are manufactured or harvested or whatever it may be.
Okay. So it starts kind of like a hobby side hustle thing. Like when did you kind of get into the more than just like being like, oh, let's make a candle or two? When did it kind of feel like, okay, we can get into like making fragrances and making you're like creating that way?
Totally. So we've been doing fragrance stuff too as part of before 2019, and then in fall of 2019, where I really didn't know what was the next chapter or page or whatever. That's when we were like, okay, well, I guess let's see what happens. Like, let's make a fall color collection, and let's just like run it up and establish a few relationships with folks we trust in, as far as like wholesalers, and just did a bunch of markets. But it was just kind of saying yes to friends.
Yeah. And so the name came from...
The name was the name of the fragrance, so it had nothing to do with... It was like kind of accidentally a double entendre, because beeswax is the premium wax. It is the slowest burning wax relative to like paraffin or soy.
Yeah. I always think of mind your own beeswax is the first thing I think.
Right, that's where I would have
like the phrase when I was 7 used to say to all my friends, because that was so cool.
Yeah, I don't know much about the roots of that one. But yeah, so the name was more just about the fragrance, and for me it was like felt really nostalgic and really like human, and it, like I got super in over my head with regards to like learning about fragrance, because it's like the most underattended sense in like the United States. Like no one gives a shit unless it's like sterile, synthetic, like clean green apple, like from Bath and Body Works, and like, what does that even mean?
No one knows what that
But
means.
like, so just like exploring like how scents are really connected to memory, and like thinking about like what's evocative and what do we respond to and what do we think is hot, and like what are associations and why. Okay. So that's what like the tangent of that part of the project was just like, damn, there's so much to think about and learn, and like top notes, heart notes, base notes, like these different ingredients can form this composite that then as natural fragrance too responds differently to everyone's body chemistry. So you and I can put on the same fragrance in the morning, and 15 minutes later we smell totally differently because our body chemistry is responding to what's in it, which I think is
That's
like
wild.
Such a trip. It's so tight.
I've learned something here for sure. I had never
no
known.
idea. Yeah.
Were you always somebody that was crafty like growing up too?
No.
By any means would you consider? No.
No, I just I definitely have like a bizarre attention span where I like jump head first. And so it's like less so it like I would reluctant to like identify as an artist, because I think there's folks that like wake up and have to create, and like the creative practice is like part like of what has to happen. And for me, that feels like almost secondary to traveling and to relationship formation and to like just like the idea of like growth and learning. So no, not intrinsically.
It's almost
crafty.
like a product of what you just, like the fact that you dedicate your time to travel, to relationships. The product then becomes, you want to dive into something a little bit different, or something that really makes, it gives you passion or gives you something to
For
be
sure,
interested
it's
in.
just like a lane.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Because I like the way you described with taking over. Oh my goodness, what is it? The Cactus Club. Wow, I had a brain cramp.
No, that's
I'm sorry.
okay.
Like you were like, I'm not really sure, and then you said I feverishly went into making it happen, and it was almost like, well, I'm not sure, and then you were all of a sudden like, that's the thing I want to do. Like
Totally,
that's really
without
cool.
thinking about all of the implications of what it entailed. It was just like, well, this is the next logical step.
Yeah,
and
right.
like, it's for sure a blessing and a misfortune sometimes.
I mean, so part of what we talk about on the show is obviously side hustles, but it also involves passion projects and things like that. So like I'm sensing, and even from knowing you, I'm like, okay, incredibly driven, but now I'm even sensing more of like, oh, she just literally dove headfirst and went for, so lots of learning curves along the way.
We're talking about Cactus. I mean,
anything.
Yeah,
Either,
there's
yeah.
lots of learning curves for sure.
What do you think was like a big life lesson that you kind of got out of it, or like what was like the hardest curveball that you might have gotten that is not called COVID?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm bad with like superlatives, like hardest or biggest or best, but I had like a pretty wild eureka moment about a month ago where we're working on forming this nonprofit Cactus Plus, and that's going to be basically everything that's accessory to a conventional venue. So all of our educational outreach, all of our youth cultivation, and work for like industry development, if you will, our accessibility initiatives, all sort of tied into this nonprofit. And in establishing a nonprofit, I didn't really think about how many tentacles and bureaucratic intricacies go into even just like the application of it. And I'm someone who is a deeply trusting person once I like get to like and know someone enough, like and an intuitive that way, but deeply distrusting of institutions. And I would like have this research assistant for the project, and so we had been sort of agonizing about these little details for 100 hours and thinking about it, and then being like, maybe I could just pay the expert, the lawyer, the person that has this trained knowledge who could in 15 minutes sort of outline this, and maybe it would be expensive as all hell, but maybe I wouldn't be questioning at the end of the day the 100 hours that we've put into like, and I feel like pretty confident in this, but like having some assurance. And it was like this like kind of like aha, like, okay, we don't need to reinvent every wheel every time, and there's a lot of really valid reasons for a lot of deep distrust of institutions. But at the same time, there like can be a time and a place where like call on the expert, and then like and like call out who in your community might have access to that, where it does like there are lots of different types of exchanges, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think all three of us kind of have that same thing of like maybe not to that level, but somewhat of like, all right, if we want to do it, we're just gonna do it ourselves. Yeah, you know what I mean? Right, I think a lot of people that have businesses, side businesses, they just think like, I think that's a common thing that we've gotten from a lot of our guests, being like, what if we just did it? Yeah. And so the hard part of that is then like dissociating from that a little bit and being like, somebody else can take this aspect of it. You know what I mean?
Because
like,
there's a sense of like autonomy, and you can go and like, you know what, like I'm gonna stop doubting, I'm just gonna start doing and just have at it. But then you realize you got to rely on your people sometimes too. Oh yeah, like the folks that are subject matter experts or like can get that part done. You may have to pay for it, but what you're gonna get is really good. But you still have the vision and the passion in mind to continue. Like you have that one goal. You may just need a little bit of help, and that's okay. That's
and like, you can maybe it won't be really good, but you can vet a few people to ensure that like the outcome makes sense. And that part I think is really really totally hard to easy to overlook, but is really important to just like acquiesce.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. I mean, people are afraid to ask for help. It's a lot, and especially
I'm
people.
afraid to ask for help. Totally.
It's not easy, and once you realize that, like that's part of being a leader of, and manager, owner, whatever you want to call it.
I hate leaders for the record.
Well, fair enough, but I know that they're able, being able to ask for help and source the question, and get better minds in the same room as you is always a big part of the process.
I would consider you a leader.
Yes, me too.
Not me.
I would think so, because you do a lot of stuff. So we can kind of touch on this too. Part of what you're doing with Cactus Club is not only making it a music venue, it is a community space, and being much more inclusive than most venues, I would say, just in general. Not even, I mean, there's great venues in Milwaukee. I don't want to
Yeah, no, and it's not competition. For sure.
Exactly. But like, I think what you're doing is you have artist markets and you have makers markets and, film screenings and things that are like just programs that bring the community together. And that's something that you don't necessarily think of when you think music venue at all.
For sure.
So like, I mean, I think part of that comes from being incredibly driven though. And someone has to do something at the top, and I think you're that person.
Yeah, but at the same time, too, I think we're trying to create a model that can demonstrate how a collaborative framework can enable and does enable folks to sort of take the reins and do programming on their own accord. And that, for me, it's like so less so about being like, my space, my club, like this is for me. or like my taste, because frankly we do a lot of stuff that I do not care about, but I think is important to exist. But where am I going with this? I think just demonstrating that can be this as amorphous platform for many different mediums, for many different types of folks. That to me is like more exciting. Less so is it like a symptom of like leadership, and more so just like an acknowledgement of like so often spaces are gatekept in such a way that it's not an option. So it's like less so dictated terms and more so just like making space for others to come into the fold, if that makes sense.
That's great. And people are following that lead. I mean, I think the vision you set forward is what's making it successful, and everyone feels like they have a space in your space, if you will, which is big. And then now it's become a community.
The people's space.
Yes.
And to your point too, I am very much the same, where we have, there's stuff that we cover on Breaking and Entering that might not be my cup of tea. But that's not to say like I should dismiss that and totally throw that out the window, because that might be their window to somebody else. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, I think when I see Cactus Club, I see a lot of things that happen that might open some doors for somebody else down the line, because they came to one event at your place and they never knew that this whole world existed. Like you guys did like a zine fest or something, right? The one time, am I completely wrong on that?
We've done different zine
Like
events. I think what you're talking about might have gotten moved to the Bayview Community Center, because it was like a crazy rainstorm.
Oh well,
mess that
you
day.
You were around. You were involved with that, and to be like some kid that might want to write might see this and go, "Oh, I can start a zine now," because you know what I mean. Like they can start their thing because they know that there's actually people out there that do those sorts of things, would do something similar, and they have a place now for that.
In their backyard too, I mean, you could see one on TV or something or whatever, but like this is in their community, specifically made for people who think like them, which is huge. And if you find that as like a kid, that's when a passion starts. And to develop a place for people can do that is really cool.
Yeah.
And I assume why an award was given. A big part of it, at least. Yeah.
A big part of it. As well as your work with, all ages shows and things like that. Like
and on that tip though, I think the common thread, or what I keep coming back to with the space and why the space and what's the point of the space, is permission giving. And I think that's another thing societally that's so rarely or discursively happens, where it's like, no, we can explicitly say like, no, you should do what you want, you should think about what you want, and you can be what you want, and you as you are enough, and that's okay. And like come and like sort of like exhale in that, I think is really unfortunately rare. And so I think totally permission giving in general, whether it's for any creative practice or whatever it may be, is really, really an important part of our picture.
There's a quote here that summarizes in my head a little bit what you just said, but and that's not for me. This is a quote I think that's pretty famous. But when you let your own light shine, you unconsciously give other people permission to do the same thing. Okay. So like you setting up that space, showing them what you're good at, along with your friends and everyone that works there, gives them the permission to go in and I have, this is actually the background of my phone.
Oh, okay. I was like, I wish I could just pull quotes like that. I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, and I memorize cool quotes. That's what you do as a speaker. You memorize them and you bring them out and be like, I said that. I made that quote. I know, I'm kidding, but that's said by someone. But essentially, allowing yourself to shine and giving the space to do so lets people know that they're free to have it. The permission that you mentioned, that's really important. And a lot of people, to your point, don't feel like, unfortunately, in this world, don't feel like they have that. And to have a space specifically dedicated to arts is something that I think we need pretty badly. So that's great.
And it's now technically a performing arts
center for performing arts.
So part of what Kelsey had done is helped change some of the legislature in Milwaukee County that to allow for all ages venues, because they can be classified as a performing arts space. I know I'm paraphrasing. There's a lot more to it.
No. That's a great paraphrase. It's not that much more involved. I mean, it's like it was a stupid code that was amended.
The designation was like it had something to do with the bar, and because you had a stage, like you could technically not do an all ages show because there was a bar. And there was not, I don't know, for what
a 1,200 square foot stage. That's
Or there was a size
that used to be the designation. Is like that was the threshold, or you needed. It wasn't termed two-dimensional, but like visual art as validated and verified by professional art critics, or like something like the phrasing was just
very
wild.
Like obscure lettering as to like what constitutes a performing art space. And so like they would do all ages shows and have to take every bottle of booze out of the club.
Oh yeah.
To the basement, not out.
To the basement, and then you had to cover all the
napkin
coolers.
holders.
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
like we'd cover the coolers. So if, God forbid, the young people see beer in coolers, even though they can see that at a grocery store.
Or like anywhere,
or a baseball game,
yeah.
or a movie theater.
Yeah, all the places.
So I would say that's also
that's
leadership too, a little bit too, like.
We're going to keep calling you a leader. You're going to have to deal with it.
I'm like collaborative organizing.
There you go.
Movement building. This is what
all synonyms. We're good.
I mean, it all.
just kidding.
You're
It's
initiating change, which is like the big
that's
thing.
the main thing.
And it's doing something that takes some bravery. I mean, like a lot of bravery to make that happen. Where do you want to push it though? Where do you want to? What areas are you pursuing now of like the next phases of Cactus? The next
Great
phases
question.
Of Slowburn,
So we're going to the state level. You heard it first. We're going to change the way the bathroom code is written such that we do not need to have gendered bathrooms. And presently that is absolutely codified at the state level in antiquated international plumbing code. And there's lots of states and counties that have written exemptions or redefinitions or excuse my not legal jargon for it. But fundamentally, I want Cactus Club with the nonprofit to be able to accomplish a building addition. Our building's 140 years old, and it's not even anywhere near accessible. So as much as we can say we're so welcoming and sweet and inclusive, we don't have a ramp to the front door.
Right.
And if somebody's in a mobility device, they can't use our bathrooms. And that's absolutely shameful, embarrassing, and I'm the first to admit it. And I've been saying it, but at the same time, the last few years haven't been conducive to saving money.
Right.
And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in a renovation, which as a for-profit small music venue would never be possible. So that's part of the impetus of launching the nonprofit, in addition to programming initiatives. But so with that, hopefully in the next year we'll start doing some like massive fundraising and hopefully get some building blueprints and proposals out so folks can kind of visualize what we're talking about. But ideally, I'd like to do one all gender 6-stall bathroom where, think of it, if depending on your lifestyle, fancy gas stations or fancy restaurants like Capitol Grill, like floor to ceiling, single stall.
Nice.
But then it can be a shared trough sink. And there's no reason with the right oversight, with the right staffing and cultural expectations and norms and whatever, that this one makes sense. And for people that do have gendered bathrooms, especially depending on what the show is, like, why are you waiting in line to use a restroom where the other one is empty? Like, that's so stupid. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Even from like a capitalist efficiency standpoint, it's like dumb and bad.
Right.
So that's the next big hurdle, is figuring out who I need to talk to at the state level to try and get this bathroom code changed so that the city of Milwaukee can say, great, green light. Of course you guys should do this. Because when I talked to them about it a couple summers ago, they absolutely laughed at me and were like, you're out of your mind.
Yeah. I mean, it takes people like you to discover these things, because I think neither Jim nor I knew that this was even like a thing.
No.
And I'm sure most people don't know that it's a thing unless you own a venue or...
And you like trip into these like situations. And then generally for most well-adjusted folks are like, who would have the capacity to battle this? I mean, similarly, this summer we had a small win where previously, if we snapped our fingers, you gave me $50,000 to put in a ramp to the front door, and we did it tomorrow, the city would have charged us about $300 to $500 a year because it's adjacent to the public right of way, which means it buttresses the sidewalk. Doesn't go into the sidewalk, but it buttresses it, and therefore you need a special special use permit, special something. But
How
you have to
dare
pay.
you be allowed to have people
The nerve.
get in with a wheelchair.
Right,
Yeah.
but you have to pay an annual
Yeah.
fee, and that's when I found out about this, I was like, wait a minute. So not only is it prohibitively expensive, you don't have any incentives, grants, whatever to help support folks that want to pursue this. But if I voluntarily make accessibility improvements, you're gonna penalize me with this perverse policy where and I was like, this is so appalling and fucked up. And like, but no, again, no one would know. Like, why would we know? We'd have no reason to know. I don't know what special permit whatever that any other business pays. And I'm sure there's all sorts of other crazy stuff. But so that was one thing that like, once that was revealed, I was like, I can't, even if I never have money to ever get a ramp, like this can't be for the sake of the books on the books.
Right.
So they did end up, you still have to pay the first time fee, but then there is no annual fee
They don't
after
keep
that.
charging you to have something that should just make sense.
Right, and it's for the public benefit and like services the greater culture of a city that whatever.
Jim, this is what happens when Kelsey and I get together is when we do
good.
get the chance to hang out because our schedules are always crazy and both of us kind of catch each other in passing. Usually I end up meeting her at Cactus for a minute while she's bartending or something, and then I have to go somewhere.
Right.
But when we get onto these like tangents of like, this is really dumb, why does this exist? But the problem is I leave it at the door and I'm like, oh yeah, that is really dumb.
That does suck, but I won't do
I
it.
should do something.
No,
Kelsey
that's
is the
not
kind
true.
of person that goes and makes it happen.
That's self-deprecating in a way that doesn't make sense. That's not true. You are very consistently, reliably showing up for artists and helping them as a springboard and using your platform as a springboard. And that's super
I will
real.
accept that.
Take
How about
it.
that?
Take
I will
it.
accept
Yes.
that.
Yeah, in a city that doesn't have any real music coverage in general, historically has done with the exception of Evan and a few others. But like what you're doing absolutely services a lot of folks. So I think we'll shout out that in this moment.
What you're doing
is
helps
that
a
how
lot of people.
podcast
too.
works? You like shout
Yeah,
things
no, keep
out?
going.
No. We just keep complimenting
It's like a
each
compliment
other.
off. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing things that help people. You're doing things that help people, Jim. You're helping a lot of
yes.
people. Everyone's helping everyone.
We're all helping. Yes.
So go help someone today. Kelsey, if people want to get in touch with you or like what you're doing with Cactus, where's the best place to go find you guys, learn about what you're doing?
I'm obsessed with people showing up. I think it's like the easiest way to actually have a real conversation and put a face to a name and an idea. And for a variety of reasons, it's not possible for some folks to show up, and I hear and feel that, and there are obviously other ways to communicate. But I really, for those that are able, want to encourage folks to like come have conversations. And it's like an age-old, timeless means of like trust building and relationship formation. And there's like so much to be gleaned from one another. And it's so easy for us to like get lost on our dumbass screens and like not do it because it's vulnerable and scary and we're out of practice and whatever. So that's one thing. I bartend most Friday nights after 8 p.m. And so
Awesome.
that is like absolutely a time to introduce yourself and kick it. But other than that, we do have a website that's pretty robust and engaging. So depending on what you're looking to do, if you want an internship, you can email us about that. If you want a job, you can email us about that. If you want a suggestion, like we should have sharps containers in the bathrooms because somebody had recently suggested that, which I think is really astute and cool and we are pursuing. There's a number of ways to email, and sometimes we're bad at emails, and so I encourage you to email again if you've emailed and didn't hear back. It's not pesky, whatever the word is. Be persistent if you care about something.
And also Cactus Club MKE on Instagram, Twitter, and I think Facebook as well is the same thing.
And TikTok recently.
Oh yeah.
And TikTok recently.
Don't mind me.
So there we go. He's so stunned by knock the worm.
Yes, knock it over.
Kelsey, this has been a blast. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for I meant to talk Slowburn, I swear, the candle company, and now we are here and talking about all this other great stuff that you do as well. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of
And
course.
we'll have some candles this fall. So we'll do some holiday market stuff. You'll see us
Love
around.
that.
Oh yeah.
Even though we're like dead on
What is the Slowburn Instagram?
a Slowburn collection, but we've been like super inactive in that way. But that's okay. I think that's also an important thing to give permission for, is that you don't have to be active all the time,
Yeah.
digitally or interpersonally. That's okay to step
Agreed.
back and then
Yeah.
hop in. And I think normalizing and embracing that instead of trying to compete for whatever.
Likes,
That's-
attention, views. all
Yeah,
the things.
whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It's just
Numbers.
like do it when it feels right. And I think too often we put pressure on ourselves to just like try and continue to like meet fictitious expectations that we self-assign.
Yeah. You can be authentically yourself.
You can. That's
the theme
that's
of
the phrase.
his talk.
That's it.
So
That
it works.
hits home.
All works together. So, thank you so much. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, thank you. Welcome. Hello. We put this out all the time as well. We're here every other Monday with a guest. And then in between that, we're talking about things that entrepreneurs, side hustlers, all of those things go through. You can find Hustling Sideways wherever you get your podcasts. So please like, subscribe, do all the things.
5 stars.
Got to rate us 5 stars. Legally, that's the
Correct.
only one you're
It's the
allowed to
only
give
one.
us.
That's-
Yes,
that's right.
that is how that
Well,
works.
we cleared that up since
Yeah.
day
I
one.
don't know. We haven't yet. Maybe we can get Kelsey on it. You can change the rule. Legally, you got to give us 5 stars. Also, you can find Hustling Sideways on Facebook, Twitter. We're on Instagram, YouTube. We are on TikTok now as well. Sharing all sorts of stuff.
go.
So, yeah, make sure you check it out. Go help somebody do some great work like Kelsey's doing. And we will see you next time on Hustling Sideways. Jim?
Keep on hustling.